In the heart of Western Uganda, nestled between the majestic Rwenzori Mountains, lay a small village. It was a bustling stopover for truck drivers and travelers, and Kumbu's restaurant was the go-to spot. Her culinary skills were renowned, and her warm smile made everyone feel welcome. Kumbu's restaurant, Tasty Bites, stood along the Rwenzori highway, its rustic sign creaking in the gentle breeze. The aroma of roasting meats and freshly baked bread wafted through the air, enticing travelers to stop and sample her culinary delights. Inside, Kumbu moved with precision, her chef's hat perfectly in place. Her warm smile welcomed truck drivers and travelers alike, making them feel at home. The restaurant's cozy atmosphere and Kumbu's charming demeanor had earned her a loyal following. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the village, Kumbu's restaurant bustled with activity. Truck drivers shared stories and laughter with the charming chef, savoring her signature dishes. "Kumbu, your cooking is truly divine," said one driver, his eyes shining with appreciation. Kumbu beamed, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you, my friend. I'm glad you enjoy it." As the evening wore on, the restaurant filled with the sounds of laughter and contented sighs. Kumbu moved seamlessly, ensuring every customer left satisfied. The village elder, Mr. Kosirai, entered the restaurant, his face creasing into a warm smile. "Kumbu, my dear, your restaurant is the heart of our village." Kumbu's smile faltered for a moment, before she replied, "Thank you, Mr. Kosirai. That means a lot coming from you." As the night drew to a close, Kumbu's restaurant emptied, leaving her alone to prepare for the next day. The village slept, unaware of the darkness lurking beneath Kumbu's charming facade. The sun rose over the village, casting a warm glow over the thatched roofs. As the day awakened, whispers began to circulate among the villagers. "Have you noticed how Kumbu's restaurant always has meat?" asked Nalwanga, a local market vendor. "Yes, it's amazing," replied her friend, Naku. "But have you ever seen her buy meat from the market?" Nalwanga's brow furrowed. "Now that you mention it, no. And her restaurant is always full of meat." Rumors spread quickly through the village, fueled by curiosity and suspicion. The village elder, Mr. Kosirai, listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. That evening, as Kumbu's restaurant bustled with customers, Mr. Kosirai approached her. "Kumbu, my dear, I've been meaning to ask," he said, his voice low. "How do you manage to always have such an abundance of meat?" Kumbu's smile faltered for a moment before she replied, "Oh, Mr. Kosirai, I have my ways. I source it from reliable suppliers." Mr. Kazari's eyes narrowed. "I see. Well, I'm sure it's all above board." Kumbu's laughter sounded forced. "Of course, Mr. Kosirai. You know me." As the night wore on, Mr. Kosirai couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. The sun had barely risen over the village when panic set in. 6-year-old Kato, son of the village elder's nephew, was nowhere to be found. His mother, Nanziri, frantically searched the village, calling out his name. Neighbors joined the search, scouring the surrounding fields and forests. As the day wore on, fears grew. The village elder, Mr. Kosirai, mobilized a search party, enlisting the help of local authorities. Kumbu, hearing the news, offered support and food to the searching parties. Her restaurant became a makeshift command center, with villagers gathering to share information, but amidst the chaos, whispers began to circulate. "Kumbu's always been a bit mysterious," said one villager. "Do we really know where she gets her meat?" Mr. Kazari's expression turned grave. He couldn't shake off the feeling that Kumbu's restaurant was connected to Kato's disappearance. As night fell, the search continued, with flashlights casting eerie shadows across the village. The next morning, a chilling discovery would change the village forever. Mr. Kazari's concerns about Kumbu's restaurant intensified. He decided to investigate further, starting with discreet inquiries. "Has anyone seen Kumbu buy meat from the market?" he asked Nalwanga, the market vendor. Nalwanga shook her head. "Never. But she always has plenty of meat." Mr. Kazari's eyes narrowed. "That's strange." He visited the local butcher, who revealed that Kumbu hadn't purchased meat from him in months. "Where does she get her meat, then?" Mr. Kosirai wondered. That evening, he approached Kumbu's restaurant, observing from a distance. The lights were on, but the curtains were drawn. Suddenly, a faint scream echoed from within. Mr. Kazari's heart racing, he rushed toward the restaurant. the door creaked open, revealing a shocking sight. Mr. Kazari's eyes widened as he pushed open the creaky door. Inside, he found Kumbu standing over a large, covered pot. The scream had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. "What's going on, Kumbu?" Mr. Kosirai demanded. Kumbu's smile faltered. "Just cooking, Mr. Kosirai." "Nothing to concern yourself with," but Mr. Kosirai noticed something odd. The pot's contents seemed to be air-moving. "Show me what's in the pot," he ordered. Kumbu hesitated before lifting the lid. A putrid smell wafted out. Inside, Mr. Kosirai saw human remains. His world crashed around him. "Kumbu, what have you done?" he whispered. Kumbu's expression transformed from calm to calculating. "You shouldn't have meddled, Mr. Kosirai," she hissed. Mr. Kosirai stumbled backward. Horror-stricken, Kumbu's dark past began to unravel, revealing a sinister motive. Mr. Kosirai stumbled out of the restaurant, his mind reeling. He alerted the authorities, and soon, police and villagers surrounded Kumbu's restaurant. As they entered, they found evidence of unspeakable crimes. Human remains, some cooked, others raw, filled the kitchen. The stench was overwhelming. Kumbu, calm and calculating, confessed to the atrocities. "I needed meat for my restaurant," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. The villagers' outrage and horror knew no bounds. They demanded justice, but the police intervened, taking Kumbu into custody. As the investigation unfolded, more chilling discoveries emerged. Kumbu's victims were mostly children, abducted from nearby villages. She had been using their remains in her cooking for years. Her restaurant's success was built on the suffering of innocent lives. The village elder, Mr. Kosirai, struggled to comprehend the evil that had lurked among them. "How could you, Kumbu?" he asked, tears streaming down his face. Kumbu's response sent chills down his spine. "I did what I had to do to survive. The trial approaches, but will justice be served?" Trial began, with Kumbu facing charges of murder, abduction, and cannibalism. The courtroom was packed, with villagers and family members of the victims eager for justice. Prosecutor Nantongo presented the evidence, detailing Kumbu's heinous crimes. Kumbu's defense, led by attorney Mugisha, argued for leniency, citing mental instability. Mr. Kosirai, called to testify, faced Kumbu with tears in his eyes. "How could you do this to our children?" he asked, his voice trembling. Kumbu's expression remained calm, but her voice hinted at defiance. "I did what I had to do," she repeated. The courtroom erupted in outrage, with villagers shouting for justice. Judge Mukasa banged his gavel, restoring order. "Kumbu, do you have anything to say for yourself?" he asked. Kumbu's gaze swept the courtroom, her eyes locking onto Mr. Kosirai. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it was too late. The damage was done. The verdict approaches, and with it, the fate of Kumbu. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Kumbu was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. As the judge's gavel fell, the courtroom erupted in cheers and tears. Families of the victims finally found closure. Mr. Kosirai, overcome with emotion, addressed Kumbu. "You took our children, our future. You destroyed our trust. May you rot in prison." Kumbu's expression remained stoic, but her eyes betrayed a hint of remorse. Outside, the village erupted in celebration. The nightmare was over, but amidst the relief, questions lingered. How could Kumbu hide her true nature for so long? Were there other victims? Could the village ever truly heal? As Kumbu was led away in handcuffs, she caught Mr. Kazuri's eye. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Mr. Kosirai turned away, unable to forgive. Kumbu's imprisonment sparks unexpected consequences. Months passed, and the village slowly healed. Mr. Kosirai became a vocal advocate for child safety and community vigilance. One day, while visiting Kumbu in prison, Mr. Kosirai sought answers. "Why did you do it, Kumbu? What drove you to such horrors?" Kumbu's gaze dropped, her voice barely audible. "I was lost, alone, and desperate. I thought survival justified any means." Mr. Kazuri's expression softened, seeing the brokenness behind Kumbu's eyes. "But why children?" he pressed. Kumbu's voice cracked. "They were innocent, pure. I wanted to consume that innocence, to feel whole again." Mr. Kazuri's heart heavy with sorrow, he left the prison, reflecting on the darkness that had lurked among them. A shocking revelation rocks the village, threatening fragile peace. A local journalist, Akampura, began investigating Kumbu's past. She uncovered shocking revelations. Kumbu's real name was Nakazi. She was a victim of child trafficking. Her captors forced her into cannibalism. Akampura's article sparked outrage and sympathy. The village reeled, realizing Kumbu's actions were rooted in her own traumatic past. Mr. Kosirai struggled to reconcile his feelings. Does her past justify her crimes? He wondered. Akampura met with Mr. Kosirai. Kumbu's story isn't simple, she said. Trauma shaped her. We must consider the complexities. Mr. Kosirai nodded. I want to understand. But can we forgive? Kumbu's reaction to the article sparks unexpected consequences. Kumbu read Akampura's article in her prison cell. Her expression changed from indifference to shock, then tears. For the first time, she saw her past through others' eyes. The trauma, the pain, the justification. She requested a meeting with Mr. Kosirai and Akampura. I'm sorry, Kumbu said, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt anyone. Mr. Kazuri's expression softened. We want to understand, Kumbu. But how can we trust? Kumbu handed him a letter. My story, my truth. Read it, share it. Maybe it will prevent others from walking my path. Kumbu's letter reveals a stunning secret, challenging village perceptions. Mr. Kosirai read Kumbu's letter, his emotions torn between sorrow and understanding. The letter revealed Kumbu's childhood abduction by traffickers, forced cannibalism as a survival mechanism, her escape and struggle to rebuild. But one sentence stunned Mr. Kosirai. I was not alone in my crimes. There were others, still hiding in plain sight. A new investigation unfolds, threatening to upend the village's fragile peace. The investigation into Kumbu's accomplices led to shocking arrests. Village councillor, Mukibi, local businessman, Kagwa, former trafficking victim, Naliul. The village reeled, but justice was served. Kumbu, cooperating fully, received a reduced sentence. Mr. Kosirai, though still hurting, found closure. Justice doesn't erase pain, but it brings hope, he said. The village began rebuilding, focusing on prevention and support. Kumbu, in prison, found solace in counseling and education. Years passed, and the village healed. A memorial stood, honoring the lost children. Kumbu's story served as a cautionary tale, preventing similar tragedies. The village moved forward, stronger and more vigilant. Mr. Kosirai visited Kumbu, now an advocate against trafficking. Your story changed us, he said. Kumbu smiled, tears in her eyes. Redemption is possible, she said. The end.